Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, yWhales, wherever you are in the world today. So it's September 15th. This is, we've done a few podcasts today. And I think it's really because it's a special day. It's post ETH merge day. And it's like, the Armageddon did not happen. And I think that that's really just such an interesting concept from a technology as early as blockchain. And while we like to think that Ethereum is a mature chain, from a technology perspective, it's still brand new technology. Proof of stake is absolutely kind of the most energy efficient form of blockchain that we have out there right now. But it's still that's an even younger technology compared to proof of work. So what we have right now going on in the space is I think there's just a lot of debates, questions, comments, concern. There's now ETH, there's now ETH Classic, and ETH POW, which has been quite a bit of conversation. So there's just a lot of innovation continuing to happen in such a young and early asset class. And the reason we have our guest here today, Vince from Polymath, is because they're right at the forefront of all this, pushing the technologies, really working on a lot of the chains, and helping to understand the technologies. And so before I kind of we dive into what you're working on today, Vince, really let's jump through some of your background because you do have a very storied history of which I think our viewers would love to know
Sure.
more about.
So I'm a software guy by nature. Like that's where I cut my teeth in the I guess in the trenches, cutting code, right at the compiler level or right in the stack level, protocols as well. I started off actually working in Accenture, right out of university, and again just building code, and it was for a trading system. And then from there, went to telecom software, really understood the reliability that was needed and required from anything you put into a telcos network, a mobile network. And, again, do we have any jitter on this line? Hopefully not, right? And that's all because of code that was written 20, 30, 40 years ago, right? And that's what's made it so reliable today. It's called 5 nines of reliability. And then from there, that's when, again, my second job was startup, right? And that's when you get the fever, right? The startup fever, the
Yep.
grind, coming in at 6, leaving at 1 a.m., doing it over and over again, wash, rinse, repeat. But really actually understanding, again, what it takes to build a company, what you've got to do actually right in the trenches. And, those that, I guess that have the capability to communicate with people, they kind of, they move into a different direction. So I started to move in that different direction out of, cutting software to, talking to the customer. And that's where, again, you get the other fever or the other itch as far as, wow, look at that. This is what it's like to, sell software to a end customer. This is what they're experiencing. So now you're taking the artwork, that the artist is painting, and you're taking it out on display, right? And who doesn't want people to appreciate their artwork? And that's what, software designers are. They're artists in their own realm, and they want people just to appreciate the things that they were doing, whether or not it's a protocol stack, because, hey, there's no jitter on this line, to, wow, that's a great UI, UX. Look at that flow. Look at the way that actually it communicates with me. Like, you feel good about using a piece of software. Right. So in 2000, actually, when I was part of I think the second startup, and back in those days we were building software in early Java 1.0, and in that era, in that
Oh
time
wow.
frame, virtual machine was not as good as it is today. We had to restart the virtual machine every 24 hours because the garbage collector really didn't work, right? And this was software that we put into a telco. So it was, okay, midnight, shut that machine down, start her back up again. Okay, any issues whatsoever? No, keep her going, right? And so we had to devise a failover mechanism where we shut the virtual machines down as we were going in order to just recycle the garbage collector. Now, all that problem was fixed in upgrades to the Java virtual machine, but that was the problems that we had in the early days. But that was where it became interesting, really working on the bleeding edge of Java, working on the bleeding edge of mobile as well, because we were building mobile services. So mobile banking in 2000. Well, what do you think that looked like? There was no BlackBerry. There wasn't even
Yeah.
actually an iPhone, right? It was the Nokia devices were all the rage. So we were building apps on a SIM card. right? And so that SIM card that you shove inside you. Yes,
Oh my
exactly.
God.
So how big do you think that app was? Pretty tiny. What were we doing on it? We had the entire actually user interface on there. And again, the user interface was just a menuing system, but we did triple DES encryption right on that SIM card, right? And we were shooting data back and forth between, that device and a back end server, doing mobile banking with banks in Canada and the US. And anyway, again, it was very fun, very interesting, but that company then got acquired, and we were in the bubble, right? And if I think you appear to be actually a vintage of my breed, but you remember the
Yeah.
bubble actually and selling dog food actually on the internet.
Listen, you are hitting the nail on the head, because I say consistently, and on every chance I get, Web 3 is a reiteration of Web 1. It's not an evolvement like Web 2. Web 1 evolved into Web 2. Web 3 is coming full circle back around and almost starting over exactly as you're. I mean, we're talking
Yeah,
about kilobits again. We're talking about tiny, like, how do you even make
right,
this happen? For God's sakes, there's JPEGs. Like, this is like the old days of, like, hey, I made a file folder. I copied the JPEG. Like, it was like magic back then, and we're seeing it all over again with a different generation. And so I love hearing, because you were right there on the cusp. I'm a little younger than you, so I was the user
right.
base for some of this stuff. But I remember, so vehemently, the challenges that you guys were facing, because it's like, it was magic. It was just magic that it even happened, that it even was something that somebody
Right.
designed and
Yeah.
built.
So the company I was working for at the time, it was acquired by, we were doing everything mobile, right? We were actually on the cusp of, what was called a WAP browser at the time, pushing content through, and along comes a large internet company that acquired us. And in 2000, that was 500 million is what they acquired us for. And that was
Wow.
no small ticket, but again, that was, we got acquired at the peak, and then it just eroded it eroded from there. But again, it's the interesting experience, the interesting ride, the people that you're surrounded with. Like, there were more Ferraris owned by actually this internet company than anywhere else, right? That, at least the concentration, the stories that we have as far as what people did during that time frame, to owning islands in the Fijis and then unloading that island in the Fiji, right? And so these were the colleagues that I was working
Yeah.
with at the time, and boy, was it ever fun. But then after the
That's a,
bubble burst, then what happened? Well, then the real work started to happen, right? And so
yeah.
it receded back to, okay, so we've got to build something of value and not just hype, right? Selling dog food online, well, that could be a real business model, but it was actually just too early, right? And if you remember, actually, people were trying to work with Java way back then as well, and trying to put, applications like word processing applications on Java, and they, right approach, wrong time. The internet didn't have enough bandwidth. Java was still actually just clunking along. The user experience was just horrible, right? So in 2000, I founded a company with colleagues of mine from the last startup, and we went at it, right? We started to build actually a big mobile server that we were selling to telecom providers, actually, and it was all based on messaging, right? Because our view was that mobile messaging is going to continue to take off. And it did, right? And so we were building the big servers that went into like Verizon, AT&T, Sprint, in order to power the text messaging craze that was going on, because they were doubling and tripling, over time. And when the telcos or the mobile operators opened it up so that text messaging was virtually free, it even went gangbusters crazy. But what happened in 2006? iPhone came out, right? And what else happened after?
Yep.
WhatsApp became a thing, right? Because the applications could be installed on the early mobile devices. So now all of a sudden, actually, the rock stars that we are, was like, hey, where'd all the traffic go? It kind of went sideways, but hey, let's sell this company and let's do something else, right? And so exit that company, now enter another company, right? What's that next company? It's building off of yet another, not another, a new industry vertical. And that new industry vertical is, at least it was called mobile money at that time, or actually it's still called mobile money. But there was a single deployment in Kenya, of a digital wallet system. And that digital wallet system actually holds fiat currency, right? And so fiat
Hmm.
fiat currency issued by the central bank, right? And so it was an early PayPal system, right? And so we looked at that and said, that's really interesting. The market could need this, right? And the market could need this everywhere. So we started building an application, back-end server, mobile application that did what? Moved money around, right? And it was a digital wallet. It held fiat currency. It could integrate actually into the existing rails of Mastercard and Visa, and we integrated into the Western Unions of this world as well. And we started deploying this. And so anywhere we deployed this, it was always with a bank and it was with a mobile operator, because the combination of those two was disruptive. Because everybody, as you know, everybody on this planet has a mobile phone now, right? Not anybody's
Yeah,
running around with one, but not everybody has a bank account, right? So how do you actually transform a phone into a bank
very true.
account, right? Well, with the technology that we were building, right? So let's deliver a digital wallet. Let's tie it to a mobile phone, right? And again, what was interesting in 2008 and then 9, when we started deploying these things, or these applications and these servers, it took me all the way back to 2000, to those early Nokia phones, because we found a customer base in the developing markets. And what did the developing market have as a mobile device? That just had that Nokia phone from 2000, right? Because that's what they could afford. It was like $15 for that device. Whereas, you know, in our generation or our day, they were a couple $100. But again, they got the cost down. It was now just a commodity, and, you know, deploy, deploy, deploy. So where that found me was mostly strapped into a plane, right? Traveling around the world, shaking hands with every customer, thanking every customer actually for their business. But we had systems, you know, in almost every country in Africa, in Southeast Asia as well. We powered actually like mobile payment systems, you know, like in places like Singapore, where it's highly competitive and well developed, to very undeveloped actually markets such as, you know, Ivory Coast, right? Or in Papua New Guinea as well. And so, you know, I
Mhm.
found myself one day traveling to Papua New Guinea and thinking, why am I here? It's a lovely country, highly dangerous, but I had 3 customers in Papua New Guinea that, you know, again, needed a system like ours, right? So we built something where I'd say people found value in it. It felt good from our point of view as well, that, you know, we were delivering something of need. It was software of need. It was digital wallet. We were digitizing fiat currency. We were allowing it actually people to, you know, not they didn't have to actually go into a bank actually whatsoever. And as an example, actually, like in Papua New Guinea, when the palm oil workers actually finished actually again their day, or when they were receiving their monthly stipend, or getting paid, the old system was a helicopter would fly in and drop a bag of cash into a fortified building with an inverted chimney, right? And inside that were the workers actually who were counting the cash, and the palm workers would come up, and they would all get paid actually through, again, windows, right, in within this fortified building, right? As soon as we introduced actually mobile money in a digital payment system, that all went away, right? Now it became, every market now had the equivalent of what you and I are used to, which is a PayPal or a Venmo solution.
You know, what I love about hearing about both of those two companies is they were simplistic ideas with massive markets, that needed kind of the true someone to bring this together. Because if you have if Verizon had their own SMS and Sprint had their own SMS and T-Mobile had their own SMS, and they don't talk to each other the same way that iMessage doesn't talk to
Right.
anything else appropriately, you end up with this disaster. You end up with these siloed things, and no mass adoption overall. And so even though you can have multiple, the banks aren't coordinating this, but they need something of which that there's value of which can move around, which is why the Swift system exists, not because it's the best, but quite simply it's the only thing that can interconnect all of them. And so I really love hearing these stories from a true Web1 entrepreneur or tech entrepreneur like yourself, that you're not in these cases. They're highly complicated, highly regulated industries and everything else, but the markets of which you chose to go after were global, massive, as big as you could possibly see them. And too often I see people with a great idea, amazing idea, going after like this tiny little market share, and I'm like, even if you get 100% of that, you're going to be bored in
Right.
6 months. And so I love hearing kind of what you're working on. So with all that, and that amazing intro, thank you so much for that. And I love just kind of,
I
and
could
this is
talk
why I
about
love
this
games. I love
forever.
interacting with people like you, and we can have follow-ups, and we'll have you on Fireside for that. But let's talk about what you're building today. So with those philosophies, with those successes and failures and stresses that you've had over time, we're now in a whole new asset class. Web3 is again, you get to make some of the same mistakes that we all made early on, which is guessing that mass adoption is like, a few minutes away, and it quite simply hasn't happened. So run through kind of the Polymesh story, and we'd love to dive
Yeah,
into that.
so Polymath actually has a history, and the history precedes me. But again, this is what attracted me to this organization a year ago when joining as well. So Polymath version 1 was, again, building an application on Ethereum, right? Security tokenization. There's a it's an interesting concept, right? Well, what is it? Digital certificates, right? And it's wrapping a digital certificate and programming it with a smart contract. So again, that the two operate within each other, but also allow, remove any conditions or errors that can happen, and that's typically introduced by human error, right? Allow the machine to take over, actually, in a capital markets way, right? What Polymath realized, as soon as they finished, building their token studio on Ethereum, was, there's a lot of inefficiencies or deficiencies actually within the Ethereum chain, layer one chain, right? And yes,
Quite a
exactly.
few.
And it's good for something, but it's not good for everything, right? And so, well, what do we do? Do we actually, build a side chain, along with Ethereum, or do we look at, what can we do that makes it all that much better, right? So in 2018, they made a decision to go full on and build their own layer one, right? And that layer one is, Polymesh. Polymesh was birthed October of 2021. And what is it, right? It's a public permissioned blockchain, right? Public permissioned, again, all actors on that chain are known actors, right? All businesses are KYB. All customers or clients, actually, that are investors on the security token side are KYC. And what Polymath is doing is now building the application on top of Polymesh to give it life, right? And it's a fundamentally it's a capital markets platform for private securities, but we're also now asking tenants of our system to KYA as well. So know your asset, right? So
Hmm.
that you and I actually, when we're now investing in these alternative real world assets that we're tokenizing, right? You can invest in confidence. You can invest actually with trust, right? Because again, I'd say we covered the ABCs of the platform, which is know your asset, know your business, know your customer. So know everything, right? So you can invest with confidence. There are no rogue actors actually on this chain whatsoever. It's public permissioned, right? There's confidentiality layers in there as well that we could turn on so that, all transactions can be confidential and we can mask those transactions as well. But that's fundamentally what we're working on, because we realize that we need to continue to, push this marketplace. We built the platform on Ethereum, right? And we're still continuing to evolve that. We built the layer one now, and now we're building that application on top of our own layer one. So we're eating our own dog food here, but we're also evolving actually as we go and learning as we go and having interesting conversations with people that have these assets to say, I got this asset, but I need capital in order to operate. What can I do with it? How can I build a portfolio of something using these real world assets? And so those are the interesting conversations that we're having.
I love everything about this, and listen, let's just go ahead with a bunch of the people that are on here. I absolutely understand decentralization. I absolutely understand the permissionless mentality of blockchain and Bitcoin and everything else that's around here. But there is laws around the world, and there is people like myself and billions of others that live in spaces of which there is laws and regulation of which you just don't want to fall on the wrong side of things. And so when we talk about, what you're hearing Vince talk about, and it is a very complex problem that needs to be solved. first and foremost before you can even talk about decentralization, which is how do you tokenize assets? How do you tokenize securities? And how do you not get a knock on a door from the SEC, DOJ, DOL, and a variety of other three-letter agencies that you don't want to have those conversations with without having very clear answers that you can answer with confidence that you are on the right side of these regulations. And so, hearing, what you guys have built, which is, again, everyone starts with Ethereum because you really have to start there. The grandfather there and amazing things. And I hope to see them around for the next few decades. But then we start talking about side chains and specializing access into this. And so I completely believe in, KYC, AML, when you're talking about securities and investing, because of what you have a lot of right now, on the existing cryptocurrency marketplaces as well as NFT marketplaces is more similar to gambling. And the reason I say gambling is because you have no idea who's on the other side of these things. I don't believe in doxed teams, meaning that like you kind of know what their Twitter handle is. I want to actually know that there's somebody that if they defraud me, they defraud their investors, they're on the hook for this. And I think that that's something that's not going to go away. Can we decades from now get to total decentralization, anonymous, securitized platforms? Maybe. It ain't going to be today, though. Absolutely not. So, I sorry for that interlude there, but I really wanted to add some color. And please correct me if I was wrong.
No, I think you're bang on it. Like we treat everything as a security, right? And by actually, just painting every asset with the same brush, and treating every asset with the same way. What we want to ensure is that someone like you, that either you're the issuer, right, or the investor as well. We don't want anybody going to jail because we don't want to go to jail, right? So, let's just actually understand what the regulatory framework is and adhere to it and be all that much better, right? And, for us, it's all about ensuring that, we're taking the stickiness out of I'd say a capital markets platform or private securities platform as well. Make it easy to use, take away the friction, incorporate actually the payment rails, incorporate actually all the elements that you need in order to, onboard a user and just operate your own business, right? Do I want to transform someone that's, because again, you could use this platform to raise capital for a farmer, right? Do I want to transform a farmer into a broker dealer? No, I don't. Well, what does he want? He needs capital to do something, right? Actually, like either to, plant his new crop or maybe to buy a new tractor or whatever it would be. But, he's got a value proposition just like anybody else that's operating a business where, he's generating income and revenue and he could probably actually pay back a yield, to an investor versus maybe paying yield off to a commercial bank when a commercial bank would charge them with more interest, right? So why don't we, create, and this is what's interesting actually about Web3 and what's interesting about, what we're doing right now, because what we're doing right now, we couldn't do this in Web 2,
No.
right? It couldn't exist without the blockchain, right? With assets actually being put onto the blockchain, if I can reference an asset from one chain to another, right? Then, it's a legitimate asset then, right? Otherwise, I'd wrap it in a special purpose vehicle or, some kind of a company or commercial framework, right? And that protects actually the investors from when they're investing, right? It gives them some form of protection. But again, that's the interesting part about Web3 is that we're building off of what was built in Web 1, what was built in Web 2, right? And we're adding yet another operating system on top of all this, right? And so I wouldn't call it, is this the new TCP/IP? No, this is actually the new blockchain. This is the new layer 1 and the applications that are running on that for, securities full stop and end.
Yeah. And again, the tokenization of assets is a multi-trillion dollar market. I mean, there's no one that's going to argue. I mean, just add in commercial real estate, residential real estate, and then you add in kind of everything else that the banking world deals with, and suddenly Bitcoin is not as near as interesting compared to actually owning tangible in real life assets. But there's some problems with that. And Vince, as you said, you've clarified it can't happen in Web 2 or Web 1. It's impossible. I don't care what you have to say because now you're still dealing with custodians. You're still dealing with this theoretical trust of which you don't really own anything. And Web 1 was read, meaning that somebody could write something, post a website, and people could consume it. That was really the majority of it. And most people, there was a very small fraction of geeks that were building their own website at that point. Web 2 is read write, meaning that you could post those websites, people could consume them, but now you had Twitter and Facebook and MySpace that it was very easy to post things on there. Web 3 is read, write, and own, actual tangible ownership on chain, that even if let's say company XYZ is tokenized an asset, whatever the case is, and company XYZ disappears and goes bankrupt and is gone, your asset, your ownership is still on chain. And as long as the Polymesh, Ethereum ecosystem, or wherever this is online and live, you have the validatable and verifiable access to showcase your ownership to that asset, whether it's in entirety or tokenized. And, we're early. So let's kind of preface that, everything that Vince is working on is bleeding edge. I mean, it truly is like, the iterations of this, they are not making it up as they go along, but there's a lot of invention that you guys have to say, well, what does it look like? No one's done it. How do we think it should be?
Right. So are we reinventing the wheel? No, we're making it better. And, we're asking the dumb questions, right? And I think that's what you have to do is ask those dumb questions as far as, this is how private securities exist today, right? And you brought up, digital custodians, right? Well, I've got a problem with digital custodians. When they're holding your crypto, there's value in what they're doing, right? You're not having to put it into a cold wallet, right? And there's some insurance actually that's tied around that as well. But digital custodians for holding security tokens, there's not really a need for that, right? And the business model is broken actually for every digital custodian that I've talked to, around real world assets, and what would you charge the end consumer? They've completely got it backwards, right? And what I mean by that is, a custodian to me is like that vault, or that vault box, or that lock box that you rent at the bank, right? You're going to drop, Jay, your Ferrari keys inside the lock box, right? Does the bank ask you what the value of what you're putting in that lockbox? Absolutely not. Do they charge you based on the value of the keys to your Ferrari in that lockbox? No, they don't. They charge you about $35 a month. That's it, right? Pretty simple. That's what that's the value of a custodian to me, right? I'm going to put my personal keys in there, right? And you're going to charge me actually, $35 a month. Don't charge me as a percentage of, that real world asset that I just tokenized. And I happen to be holding on to a fractional ownership of something that's worth $1 billion. No, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever, right? It's just the keys, not the percentage of the value, right? And so what I'm seeing is that everybody looks at, the existing, I'd say, stack, or like not the technology stack, but the process stack, the policy stack, the regulatory stack. And they say, oh, for this to exist in Web3, all that has to exist as well. Why? Why does that need to exist, right? Because when we digitize something, like when we're digitizing paper, like we're trying to get rid of paper actually, and like that's why DocuSign and Sign Now and all these companies are flourishing, right? We're getting rid of paper, we're making it electronic, right? We're removing the grease, we're saving trees, right? But ultimately, actually, we cut something out of that, right? But and which was again paper, right? But we've introduced actually streamlined processes and workflows as part of that. So when we're building a brand new, I'd say, trading stack or capital market stack, I think we have to question everything that goes along with it, along with the actors as well. And I think regulators should be looking at this as well and saying, okay, well, is all this actually required? Is it necessary? Because this is adding cost, to everybody actually within the ecosystem. Let's look at actually how can we reinvent ourselves. And I think, and this is, again, my learning actually when in the last company at Telepin, right? We went to the developing markets. You know why? Because the regulatory framework didn't have actually all the red tape, right? They could rewrite their payment framework, right? And I think this is what's going to happen is that if we don't start asking the tough questions in the developed markets, North America, Europe, Hong Kong, Singapore as well, the developing markets will say, hey, I need a capital markets platform actually, and I can rewrite the regulatory framework here actually, because I don't have all that infrastructure, I don't have all those processes, but technology actually will solve it.
Yeah.
And this is what technology typically does. It solves a problem, right? So let's not just create a problem actually and just layer the same people into the same place.
Yeah, no, I love that. And too often I get pitched a concept and a process, and they've taken a Web 2 kind of concept, and they've done nothing other than just add some Web 3 layers. They said, look, if we take away the Web 3 processes and all the Web 3 stuff, what do you actually have? And generally there's nothing there. They're just like, well, it's just on chain because it's on chain. No, that's not what we want, and that's not what we need. You're not advancing the asset class or the industry. You're just creating, kind of a niche little thing that may be cool or not. What I come back to, and really my understanding of the Polymath, Polymesh sides of things, is that you guys are helping to evolve what should have been done years ago, through Web 2 technologies, but never was going to happen. Because why would you have a bank or the law offices give up the amount of control they have? Right now I do a lot of commercial real estate, and when you think about what work a title agency does. And by the way, I own a title company, so I know they're really just grabbing a bunch of public data that's out there, but it's hard to get to. Like the concept of every homeowner running down to the courthouse to go dig through the files to find the plot maps and everything else. Like, it's just, in today's convenience factor, like Gen Z is never going to do it. You even tell them to courthouse, they're going to be like, am I in trouble? Why do I got to go there? No, this is just how things work. And so I love the thought that you're like going like, look, the framework's going to be there. You're going to make sure that there's a conversion, but it has to make sense. It has to help evolve. And even if you're in a lower, unregulated area, you still have the ability to make sure that investor flows, because I think that's the biggest thing in evolving market classes, such as, Africa. Wouldn't it be great if you can get America or Canada or a first world country to want to invest in your project and product? And retail is great, but you want institutions, and institutions are still going to want to, make sure that you're adhering to the highest level of the protocol.
Yeah, no, that's right, exactly. And the more that we can, start pushing that envelope, I think the better it will be for everybody in the food chain, right? But it even has to. I'm glad you brought up, that you own a title company as well. Why aren't land registry actually systems on the blockchain? Like, it's got to start at that level, right? So that we can reference, then you don't need title insurance actually, as title is changing from like one owner to the other. Why? Because it's there. It's on the public blockchain. You can reference it. You can look it up. You can build all sorts of applications, just starting at those massive databases, or what should be massive public databases, or databases on the blockchain.
Yeah, and, the way that you're doing it, and that's the thing I want to point out. And again, I don't have any investment in Polymath or Polymash or anything else here, but I want to point out something that Vince and his team are doing, which is the scale and the size of it. Is there, not only do you have your DApp, but it sounds like you're going to allow other DApps to operate on your chain. And the reason why that's so important, and I've seen a variety of people saying, "Hey, we can tokenize real estate. Hey, we can, we're a digital, lender, we're a digital title company, everything else, and we're writing to the Ethereum blockchain or whatever the case is." They don't actually have a real protocol. They're just writing to a block, and you would have to theoretically call them or reach out to them to find out, where in the world did you put this? like where is this random one house in one state that you did? Because I do want to pull up what you did, 5 years ago, but it's impossible to find. So you haven't really created a system or processes or procedures. You're just kind of one off using the technology and using some buzzwords, which is very different than what you guys are doing today. Correct?
Yeah, no, that's right, exactly. And we're looking at this is a global play. Like, this is a massive play. Everything can be tokenized. Every real world asset can be tokenized. Our racehorses can be tokenized, fractionalized. You could be, a fractional owner of a racehorse, right?
It's just
When
my
you think
dream come true.
about, exactly. But when you think about businesses actually that are in desperate need of operating capital, right? Craft distilleries are popping up all over the place, right? And if you're making whiskey, and I don't know if you drink scotch at all, Jay, or even a whiskey. Like, a good whiskey needs that age at least 8 years, right? So what does a
Mm-hmm.
a producer need to do during that time frame? There we go.
Here's a good bottle of Rip Van Winkle. It goes for about $1,500 a piece. And you're entirely right, because liquidity is the number one problem of any and all companies. Don't care if you're Google, don't care if you're, Joe's, sandwich shop down the street. At some point, you're going to run into a liquidity issue. And right now
Right.
you have two solutions: a bank or a hard money lender. And probably most people don't know what a hard money lender is, but essentially a loan shark.
Mm-hmm. That's right. But now you're going to have a capital markets platform where you can tokenize the cask. You can offer it up to, retail investors, accredited investors. Actually, basically, you're pre-selling the product. But again, you've got something that's tied to something else, right? And that cask has actually got an address where it's stored. It's got a number or a serial number actually that represents it as well. So again, we're packaging it up now. The distiller can, remove some cash off the table, use that for operating capital, and you can almost even use the power of a DAO structure as well, where the token holders of that, of that cask, they can elect to say, I want that age for another 5 years, because as you age, there's incremental yield, and that yield is somewhere between 5 and 18%, depending on actually, what distillery you are, and then actually, what region actually you're distilling from, right? So it has everything to do with, the barrel, the wood, the temperature, the cask, actually everything, right? And so, again, let's use actually the power of the blockchain. Let's use the power of DAOs even as well, and allow security token holders to elect, what do I want to do with my real world asset? Do I let it age for another 8 years? And then it will be a really refined product. And maybe I'll just take I want a bottle of that as well. Or, let's sell out now, right? As the offering was described.
I love that you brought governance into the conversation and DAOs, so decentralized autonomous organizations. And there's enough articles. Literally, just Google DAOs will eat the earth, and I completely agree with that. yWhales is moving towards a DAO, a legal DAO, and it takes a lot of time to be a legal DAO that can hold tens of thousands of members. So it's again a little bit of the chicken and the egg with regulation. The technology is easy. The regulation is the hard part of it. And so I love the concept that you have, and really now we're showcasing kind of the power of what this is, because now you have a community that can be really passionate about anything. Doesn't matter whatever the case is. So there's entire websites, Facebook groups, so many that are into whiskeys and variety of things. But let's take that at one example and go to a little further. You can have 1 million people currently right now in a Facebook group saying that we're passionate about whiskeys and we'd like to buy a bunch of whiskeys and have, hold them together. It's chaos. It's actually impossible to do. They can raise a bunch of money, they can give the money away, they can have some holding companies, but they don't have any like tangible way to manage the voting, the shares, who has what, without turning it into like a whole massive off-chain mess and spending tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars a year maintaining the books there. But what Vince is talking about here from the Polymesh is it's a couple of clicks of a mouse to deploy tokens, to deploy governance and everything else. And remember, because there's an expectations of profit, you're triggering the SEC rules that this is a security. So you can go do this on the normal Ethereum chain. You can do anything you want. If you don't want to have to worry about being woken up in the middle of the night from a 3-letter agency or getting that knock on your door or that letter in your mailbox, you need to be able to manage it like a security. And that's the biggest difference that we're talking about here is you have to have a platform that's managing the KYC, AML, KYA, which is, the new one, and a variety of other things. And so I really, again, just entirely believe, what you're doing and how hard it is to do this. So essentially what we're referring to here is that digitization of assets is really, really hard. And you can do it from an easy standpoint, like, clicking a couple buttons, Vince, as you all know, we can create a DAO, we can distribute tokens, we can do all sorts of things. But if you don't control those, and if you don't know who owns them, you have a real problem, because you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. If you have like, nobody cares when you're a little, collecting a bunch of Beanie Babies, like, fine, not financial advice, not legal advice. You can probably skate under the rug. But as soon as you start talking about real profits, real expectations of profits, you've got security issues, and I consult a lawyer and go through all that. but you can't even begin to have a conversation about managing that process without a chain like what Polymesh is talking about doing, which has built-in KYC, AML, and all those other things, correct?
Yes, that is correct. That is correct. Yeah, and it's, we want to ensure that, again, as we're building the system, it has all the bells and whistles that's needed, right? The confidentiality layer that's required, the frictionless experience from an end user point of view, right? And so there's, we've been, I think one thing I didn't talk about is actually, well, when does our new platform launch? Well, that new platform launches in about 2 to 3 weeks, right? We're
Ooh.
just actually finalizing the the framework, right? But we've been having actually several show and tells a day, right? We're conducting private demos, for end customers. We've got customers that we are launching sandbox environments for, right? And we are interfacing with regulatory bodies as well. So we're doing all the right things and pushing on all the right people, right? And again, we're doing it in a very polite way to ensure that everybody understands what this represents, right? It's a big opportunity. Big opportunity. It's a new asset class, right? And every exchange around the world, I think, actually should be running actually a platform like this, or a node, and an application from Polymath and Polymesh.
So to take just to kind of let's take a few steps back and remember why we're dealing with this problem. It is because unlike in the Web 1 world, where they really let kind of the wild, wild west occur for a long time, something as simple as sales tax. If you bought it online, there was no sales tax. Amazon built their empire by having a 5 to 10% advantage over every mom and pop out there, even if their product was priced the exact same because they just didn't have to pay sales tax. And unfortunately, they're not letting Web3 have those same advantages to kind of get off the ground. So instead of saying, hey, we're going to give you some leeway here as the technology is evolving and to figure this out, and at some point we'll come back and tax you. I mean, they're taxing really hard right off the bat. Not just taxing, they're also regulating very hard right off the bat. And they've gone after a variety of kind of protocols and dApps, such as Tornado Cash, that just recently happened, and essentially they went after that from an OFAC standpoint. And no one's going to defend anyone on the OFAC list. You're bad people, and we don't want to do business with you. And so I think that's great. But shutting down like Bank of America because one or two people were using that on the OFAC list is insane to think about. But that's what's happened to us. And so from your perspective, Vince, do you feel like we're even moving in the right direction with regulation? Because I struggle with, does anyone in DC even understand what in the world we're talking about?
It's baby steps. I think it's gonna take baby steps, and I think what we need to see is the traditional exchanges start to adapt this technology, and we are starting to see evidence that is happening. Right, so the Nasdaq is dabbling with T0. We're looking at again building an alternative actually platform and trading system as well. And I think again part of that need is that have you ever peered inside a traditional exchange? Do you know actually how it's run? Right? We all have this I guess this view or vision that it's just like Robinhood, right? And it's a digital platform, and look, I can buy a stock and it's instantaneous. That is not how an exchange runs. That's why it's T-2 for settlement, right? Because it's not real time. There's still physical paperwork actually being sent around. That's and you start asking yourself the question: what's the role of a transfer agent? Do you know what a transfer agent does? Transfer agent actually represents you and they ensure that your stock certificate is inside your folder in that filing cabinet, because when you buy stock, actually that's what happens. A physical certificate is issued, not a digital certificate, right? So when that business that you just bought a stock in actually issues a dividend payment, who gets it? Well, you do, right? But where does it go? It goes to the transfer agent that's on record. That transfer agent does a deposit into your account on record, and he does that for you, right? That's his role. That's the world that we live in right now. There's still a lot of physical things actually being sent around, paperwork, checks, right, from the corporations actually in order to be deposited into your bank account. Well, let's remove all that. Do we not live in a digital world? Well, we have, but not all industries are. So this is the upgrade that this industry will receive as part of actually getting to T0, or, real-time settlements on all transactions. Everything's going to be on the blockchain. All payments will actually be orchestrated as well in real time with each other. Settlement will be instantaneous. Right. So that's the, does the regulators actually see a need for this? Well, the industry sees a need for this. Regulation actually has to be written in order to allow for this to happen. But we're not asking for, a revolution. We're saying let's evolve to something better, right? I think the regulators are starting to see it. We've got the right lobbyists on the Hill that are helping to push the envelope. We're working with, I'd say, the right law firms, and what we're doing is we're building an arsenal of referral firms that we could point customers to. What's your real world asset? What problem are you dealing with? Okay, who's in our database? You need to talk to ABC, actually, of the industry, this law firm, this accounting firm as well. These are the people that you need to work with. This traditional broker dealer as well, right? So we're building this Rolodex so that, again, we can help to not churn this market, but actually really to push and evolve this market. And what I don't want is, I don't want actually my customers paying, I'd say, law firms to be educated on this industry. I want lawyers that are already educated, that, again, when I'm pushing them left and right, it's immediate. Like, I understand this space. I understand the regulatory environment, what you can do, right? Because what I hear, and the frustration with people that are trying to tokenize projects now, is that lawyers are telling me what I can't do, but they're not telling me what I can do, right?
Yep.
So what we're doing is we're finding these are the people that say what you can do, right? In a legal way, in the framework that's actually today, and not pushing and wrapping things up in structures that are very questionable.
No, and I love that. And there's only one small point I want to add to what you said, because everything is correct and relevant. The most obscene part about the entire stock exchange process that caused me to really leave the stock market, no one has an actual count of how many shares are issued and where. They, once a year, they try to reconcile and see where it is. But there's a lot of times where there's, maybe there's a 100 million shares, and there's 200 million, 300 million that are outstanding from the various longs and shorts and all sorts of things that are happening. And really, I think that GameStop, whether you believe in what they did or not, really did showcase how absurd Wall Street is with some of that stuff. And that's what blockchain has the win and the ability, is you have transparency that you can audit in seconds where these tokens are, who's got them, what the asset's worth, and no one's trading on. If you're trading on future, that's great. It's separate from the actual physical shares, tokens, or coins. So Vince, as we kind of bring this, to a close, and there's so much amazing things that are happening in this space. My question that I have for you, as a Web3 entrepreneur, that has really cut your teeth from Web 1 to Web 2 and now into Web 3. What's the biggest difference that you're kind of seeing about innovating in this space compared to where you kind of, had found success years ago?
Definitely we can produce a lot faster, right? And it could just be, and what attracted me to, Polymath in general, it was the people, right? And what they were trying to build, and who they were trying to convince, right? Capital markets is not a domain of expertise, but now there was telecoms, and now there was fintech, right? A wallet system. So, what attracted me to Polymath was the people, the technology, and then that industry vertical, right? And how we're going to transform this. What I've also seen is that just with the stacks that we're using today and the open source technology frameworks that we're able to incorporate, we can build something so much faster, right? Where, as I'd say, in the old school way of doing things, Web 1, you had to build your own bloody data centers, your own server farms. You didn't rent space, you rented an air conditioned room, but you still have to haul in your own servers and, wire your own fiber, right? Web 2 was still very much that same way. AWS really wasn't entrenched until 2010 is when we started to see evidence of real, clouds forming, and nobody really understood the cloud. Now, every company actually, when they start out, is like, what's their data center? AWS. Or is that production environment? AWS, right? We're all in the cloud, right? We're all able to, accelerate development and get to a commercial production environment that much faster. And I'd say the kids coming out of school these days, they've got it right, right? They've been dabbling in really interesting technologies, very different from when you and I were in university, right? And so they're on the bleeding edge, and they're used to actually, and this is not a slam, but they're used to actually being, a little bit lazy, right? But being lazy is a good thing, actually, because that allows you to, take shortcuts as far as, well, how can I get to the endpoint that much quicker? I can use this open source technology. I can incorporate this framework. Oh, look what I've got here. There's another library that, allows me to orchestrate actually a complete web flow as well. So it's
No,
the integration is in the mashups are just actually amazing. So we started, and just to give you actually some I guess some light or some a scope actually into the Polymath engine. We looked at how do we, again, I joined October 2021, right? We were launching Polymesh. Okay, my role now is like, build the application on top of actually this chain, right, to give it some value, give it some breadth, right? So what do I start doing? I start having conversations with everybody that actually is coming through the door, right? What is it that you need? What do you want actually? How can I solve your problem, right? And so we distill it down to, after 100 conversations, this is what everybody wants, right? Everybody needs this, that, and the other thing. Let's put it together, right? And let's start building, right? So do we build it? Do we buy it? Or do we license something? So then we ran a process as far as, well, what is there that's out there in the marketplace that I can license from a technology point of view that allows me to at least leapfrog into a commercial aspect that much quicker? There's things out there, but they would be, it doesn't give me what I need because I don't own it in the end. I need to own it. So we start looking at, well, what is there to buy? Lo and behold, look, we found actually this wonderful little company that started building a platform. It's been pre-commercial. Strike up a conversation actually with the founder, and we close a deal in 100 days, right? From beginning to end. This software is now part of ours. So, and that's part of our announcement actually back in August timeframe, July timeframe, was we bought MetaFinance. MetaFinance now gives us that capability to leapfrog into the marketplace and gives us that baseline platform that we can now start building the capital platform that we're now building, right? And so we made it our own, right? And so now the engineering team is, well on its way, and, and ripping it apart and putting it back together again. But now where are we? We're in the month of October, or actually, sorry, September, but we'll be launching actually at the end of this month, our platform, right? And so that's less than a year that, that I've been on the scene. That's 6 months, less than 6 months of the engineering team really getting their hands on it. But we've now got a minimum viable product that our customers can now use in order to get to that marketplace, right? And on what we think is it the best chain that's out there. So the Polymath Polymesh combination is like, it's the Batman and Robin of this industry, because we also help to drive that roadmap for the blockchain as well. And so that's our fundamental competitive advantage actually in this industry, is that if someone comes to us and says, yeah, but I need it to do X, Y, and Z, oh, geez, that means actually I need to make a change at the core blockchain level. Well, we can do that. Why? Because we authored that, right? And we contribute actually to the evolution of that blockchain. And, we're also part of the governing council in order to help, drive it in the direction that we need to go. So, all those elements are there with smart people, smart technology, interesting industry vertical as well. It's and all those things attracted me to the space, but also actually just keeps everybody in the team motivated actually on that single purpose that what we have to solve and what we're building.
I absolutely agree with everything you just said, and I've again, you probably have never watched one of our podcasts, and God help you if you want to. But I hear this from so many entrepreneurs like yourself about A, the speed to dev is light years faster than anything they had before, but B, everyone's thinking about it from a very modular standpoint. And I think that's one of the things that's going to start coming out is people are going to be talking Web3 is about modulars. This is a Web3 module because the reality is you're right. If you don't have to build a data center, you don't want to. If you don't have to build your KYC onboarding process, you just plug it in. And that's the great thing about blockchain is you can you may have to build something today, but if somebody builds a really great tech stack that fixes this, you don't have to be exclusive to just what your devs build while holding on to security and while holding on to kind of the confidentiality that you need.
Mm-hmm. No, that's right. Exactly. And I think it's the same approach. We're seeing this, again, what we're doing in the software world, that's happening in other industries as well. Like people are taking shipping containers and like stacking them together and making homes out of them as well. So, there's some parallels that are happening in other industries as well, where they're saying, well, why can't I just take this, use that as my framework actually, and, build a house out of a steel metal shipping container? Well, why not, right? And it's because somebody asked the question, why not? Why can't I? Well, no, you can.
I love that. Vince, really, thank you so much for coming by. I mean, these are amazing thoughts. It's amazing technology you're building. I'm so excited to kind of, really start playing with the technology. I know that yWhales is talking with Polymesh a little bit as you guys as well. So we're really excited to start letting our members play around with it as well. But for anyone that kind of wants to learn more, kind of do a little bit more deep dive into what you guys are doing, are you attending any conferences or how to find you online?
Yeah, we are attending a conference in October in Las Vegas, Money 2020. So we'll be there, and so come and see us. We've got a showcase booth, and so does Polymesh as well. So we're there in full force with with both companies. But visit us on Twitter at Polymath Network. Follow me on Twitter too. I'm Vinny 2.0. Grab me on LinkedIn as well. Actually, LinkedIn is that number one platform that I use in order to communicate with anybody and everybody. Or just reach out to us on our website. Download our collateral, read the material, right, and reach out to us for a demo. We're really proud and eager to showcase to the world what we've built and actually how we're going to solve real problems and deliver a real solution for need.
Love it. Love it. Vince, thank you so much. yWhales, this is Vince from Polymath, Polymesh. Really appreciate spending the time with us today. And for all of you guys, please be safe out there, be good, and we'll catch you next time.